Welcome and thanks for taking the time to listen in to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. It's a place to get to know the person behind the professional, going below the surface of what we see. Join with me as I talk to some incredible individuals from around Australia and the world. Today I'm talking with Dr. Jodie Lowinger, a clinical psychologist and executive performance coach who is recognized as one of the world's leading anxiety, mindset and resilience experts. If this conversation triggers anything, or if you are struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever, what time of day it is you happen to be listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. On tonight's episode, whatever it is, I've got the amazing Dr. Jodie Lowinger with me as my guest. Now, I've known Jodie for a number of years, taught her son back many moons ago. He's now almost a qualified doctor, I believe. And Jodie, in her own right, is also a medical doctor. I'm going to give her a little bio now. So Dr. Jodie Lowinger is the CEO and founder of the Anxiety Clinic, a large clinical psychology practice offering digital and in-person treatment for people of all ages. She is an adult, child, and adolescent clinical psychologist. She's a podcast host, an anxiety and mindset expert, and also a best-selling author of the Mind Strength Method, a groundbreaking methodology built on neuroscience and named by The Australian as one of the 50 Australian inventions changing the world. As an executive high-performance coach, keynote speaker, and media commentator, Dr. Jodie frequently speaks on TV, digital, and global stages and is passionate about helping all ages manage anxiety, build high performance, and thrive. Dr. Jodie Lowinger, welcome to the Tattoo Teacher podcast.
Great to be here.
I just want to firstly thank you for your time. I know, just listening, for my listeners, just hearing your brief bio, you must be a tremendously busy woman, so I thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
It's amazing to finally connect again. It has been a number of years. We first connected back in Sydney through a whole range of different avenues. So it's great to see you again, and it's great to see your children thriving as well. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, and very much thank you, Phil. I mean, we were talking just before very briefly about the importance of pivotal role models in our children's lives, and so often those pivotal role models are teachers, and I have you to thank as being one of those individuals. I've got 2 boys and a girl, and my boys have gone through school, and my eldest went through school with you, and they're thriving, thankfully. So thank you, and to all the teachers out there, thank you for the work that you do and the impact that you're making in children's and adolescents' lives, and certainly us as parents as well.
Well, thank you for that. I will take on that appreciation. It's hard. I think it's hard for teachers to actually take on a thank you. I think it's just one of those things that as teachers we tend to give and give and give with no thought of even actually taking any sort of acceptance back for what we do, because I think most educators out there are just in there for the job to make the next generation of young men and women just give them every opportunity to succeed in whatever avenue they want to go into. So
I think that's it's so wonderful hearing you say that. I can really relate to that as a clinical psychologist, because we're both of us as educators, as teachers, and as clinical psychologists, we're trained to have that deep empathy and have that deep other person centeredness, whether it's our clients in therapy or whether it's students in a schoolroom. It's not about us. It's about nurturing and supporting and facilitating the other person to thrive. So I can really relate to that, and I also find it really uncomfortable being on the receiving end of those sorts of kind words, really.
Yeah, well, I assume it must be difficult at times, especially on a national and possibly global stage when things that you've done, you've got TV coverage. I know you've been on a couple of the national news networks. So yeah, it must be difficult because I know, as you said, that, as empathetic people, we tend to want to give and share, but not actually receive, or we sometimes don't know how to receive those compliments and those giving back to us.
Yeah, and it hones certain skills. It hones really wonderful skills of empathy, and so long as we're doing it because it's our values base, right? And um, I don't know. I find I don't I probably just like to be in the shoes of the person who's doing the listening, I suppose. Although that's in a therapeutic context, certainly in a keynote speaking context, and in a such as this, in a podcast context, I'm very, very comfortable. But that's because it's all this centeredness about having a platform to share your voice to help people on scale, which is what my personal mission is. So it's actually not about me, it's about everybody else. So yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and that's one of my goals of this podcast is to get the stories of educators and other professionals who, I mean, everyone's been involved in education. That's as simple as that. But it's to get those stories and those personal anecdotes that have impacted people's lives too. I mean, we hear so many negative things, especially about education, and I've had many conversations about being the political football. And look, that's life. That's how it is. But my one of my goals is to get the positive stories of education and how education has impacted lives out there to the greater public. So thank you for being part of it.
Thank you for inviting me. I love this, and once again, lots of affinity with what you have to say, because it's the same in a mental health space. Is we talk about the problems so much, and I'm very much about talking about the solutions and talking about empowered action. In a mental health space and in an anxiety space, it's about moving out of what's wrong and moving into what's right. And certainly with anxiety, there's so much underpinning that which talks to people's strengths and talks to people's care factor in an anxiety space, and also in an education space, when we can turn the narrative to really focus on the positives and focus on how can we build a platform that makes things even better, to equip teachers and students and the whole education system with strategies that will help students thrive but help teachers thrive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, in one of your goals is being a psychologist. You're there to help people, and that's one, it's your job, but two, just from this very brief conversation, I'm sure our listeners can hear that that's also who you are. So behind that, I love to ask all my guests. One of the first questions I love to ask them is, "What is your why? What's your why behind what you're actually doing?"
My why is, if I talk to sort of anxiety, um, the work that I've done, I've had the wonderful privilege to be able to see the impact that the right practical strategies can have in people's lives. And so my why is really to create a world where every person can manage anxiety and thrive, which is why I've created the Mind Strength methodology, which is drawing on decades of evidence-based practice to bring it together in a methodology that really, I'm very thrilled to say does help a lot of people. So my why is very much a heart-driven why, and ultimately it's to help people on scale. And in this world that we're existing in, where there's so many people struggling because the nature of what we do is out of line with really what we need as human beings, it makes me even more passionate to dig deep and to use my voice to help as many people as possible. So this part of me, my heart, is kind of pulls me every day. I'm very heart-centered, and kind of the good thing about being heart-centered is you approach your situations from a really authentic space, and it's just kind of doing what I love to do, really.
I love that term that you used there, that heart centered space. So it's giving from who you are, your soul, your the person in there that wants to help. So yeah, I love that heart centered. I might have to steal that one from you.
Well, I know what I know of you, Phil. You're incredibly heart centered, and no bullshit, right? Just get in there, be real, do what we love to do, and do it underpinned by values that drive us. And if I'm and my kids would probably not necessarily want me talking about them, but I suppose I'm talking about myself. If I think about it, the way I am with my kids is very similar to the way I am when I'm doing a keynote, or whether I'm working with teachers or in the therapy room. There's not that much difference, because it's really working from here and working from here, and here is kind of thinking, how can I be the best, whether it's be the best mum I can be or be the best psychologist I can be. It's really that thinking mind, but ultimately it's that heart connection with people who I engage with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, no bullshit there. Like as a teacher, and I think any teacher can attest to this. You've got probably when you walk in a new room and you've got a new class, you've got about 30 seconds to be authentic. And students, teenagers, young people have this innate ability to pick up on a falsehood that someone brings in. So in my classroom, in my life, I try and bring who I am. Now, obviously, sometimes that might have to be tamed in different settings. You might use different language, or rather than having my tattoos out and my earrings in, I'll have a collar and tie. But but
But
that doesn't
you'll
stop.
roll those sleeves up, right?
Absolutely, I'll get on the sport days. The polo shirt will be on. It's like, oh, sorry,
Absolutely.
but again, it's about it's about having. I think even the mask of a different outfit, authenticity, and who you are can actually still shine through. So hopefully
Completely.
I've done that. Hopefully I've done that with my students, and do that with my continue to do so.
As you say, they're a very scrutinizing audience and will pick up on inauthenticity in a moment's notice. It's remarkable how many similarities we're touching on in this conversation with therapy and teaching, because it's the same in the therapy room. It's kind of like, be authentic, and it's just, whether it's a child, an adolescent, or an adult, the engagement is the same. It's about the power of that. Well, in the therapy room, it's the therapeutic relationship, but it would be the teacher relationship, of course. It's what you can enable, what you can facilitate in the skills that you have as educators, the skills that you have in teaching. But ultimately, one of the most powerful skills is the power to build an authentic relationship that is, we're in it for the right reasons, because that's what people bounce off at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And relationship, I think, is key. And I mean, I know in education, if I don't build a relationship with my students, there is absolute no possibility of any, what I shouldn't say any, but the learning is inhibited if I
Yeah.
don't have the relationship there, because I can't speak into them when they are doing well. Yes, I can praise them, but if I haven't got a relationship, then that is the same. If they do something negative, I can't speak negatively into them to correct their behavior, because I don't have the relationship and I haven't spoken positively into their life. So why should they listen
Yes.
to the negative?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Is that I suppose, deficit versus just being in that abundance space already. And yeah, completely.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a tough gig. I mean, both where we sit on either side of the desk is always tough because we're there. Our goal is to help those that we're with. Sometimes they accept it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's a longer journey, and sometimes I guess sometimes we don't even see it. We don't see the results. We've sown the seeds, and we hope for the best, but often we don't see the positive influence that we've had until often years later.
Yes, and how lovely that must be to see that the foundations that you've built through that authentic engagement. I recently did a TEDx talk on driving systemic change in the education system through building strategies to bolster well-being and resilience from the ground up. So to help children and educators to manage anxiety and thrive. And it's interesting in the space of anxiety is there's so many different faces of anxiety. It is our inherent perceived threat, but it does come up in so many different ways because it's the fight or flight. So the the faces of anxiety within children and adolescents can so often be unrecognized. And it's picking up on those nuances as skilled educators to to help a student move out of that fight or flight space, and it's the power of the relationship, and it's the power of moving out of judgment and assumptions that makes such a difference. So oftentimes, oppositional behaviors might be the fight, and that might be underpinned by anxiety. So I love what you're saying about really, putting the jelly beans in the jar, so to speak. I know that that expression is used in other contexts, but um, we want to make sure we put the jelly beans in the jar um, with so we're helping children and adolescents to recognize that we see them for their inherent worth, and so we're utilizing that space of respect and being on the same level um, to help them to feel good about who they are, and moving out of that fight or flight space, which might be they're judging me, they think I'm not good enough, or whatever it might be. And then we're building a foundation which enables a child or an adolescent to thrive and to be more open and more receptive to learning.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's our goal. Is it's to get them to. I mean, you know this as well. That school, yes, there's a curriculum and they need to learn and they need to move through the system as such. But I think also school is there to teach students how to learn how to learn,
Yeah.
but also how to be contributing members of a society, um, but also how to learn how to cope with conflict, with joy, with loss, um, with everything, dealing with emotions over a 7 year period, roughly. I mean, you probably know the science behind this better than I do, and the statistics better than I. But over a 7 year period, you pretty much experience everything that life has to offer. With losing a loved one, maybe moving home, a birth in the family, something like that. Everything sort of happens in those cycles, as we know. And I guess with schooling, we see the students run through these cycles, and we see them hit the highs and the lows. And how do you see, with your experience within schooling, do you see some of those highs and lows being activated more frequently?
Certainly, it's this is life, and this is life in a fairly chaotic world that we exist in, where there's no very little downtime, and students are being bombarded with social media, and so it's about as it's about making friends with that context rather than butting heads with that context. But it really makes the role of the teacher all the more important. because it's a pivotal role that counterbalances the chaos of what exists beyond the hours at school, right? And there's so much that is of merit in the schooling situation for students, because it's routine, it's consistency, it's the power of relationships, it's interpersonal reciprocity. It's that those fundamental things that we need as human beings to build emotional intelligence. And the emotional intelligence is about leaning in and allowing for emotions. And it's really about not having the emotion, but it's teaching skills on how can I help my students and help myself to respond to those emotions with helpful actions rather than unhelpful actions. And we're seeing,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so for a teacher to have this, it's such a profound responsibility, and a profound opportunity. And so what I'm really passionate about is supporting teachers, is supporting education systems and education leaders, to help you to go forth and help so many others, in the role that you do, especially with the nature of, and this is a generalization, but I see it time and time again, the nature of educators self-selected into this role of education because of that care factor, because of that passion to make a difference in a young person's life. And so that care factor means that you're in the right place because you have a profound responsibility, but it also means that you're vulnerable to the potential to burn out and the potential to look after others and forget the importance of looking after yourself. So while, yes, we recognize that children and adolescents are going through the ebbs and flows of life, and the role that teachers play in supporting young people through that, it's incredibly important that we don't forget the huge importance of teachers looking after themselves. Uh-oh, Phil. Sorry, I
Yep.
think we dropped out for a second there.
No,
Um,
that's okay. That's
did you?
okay. We can chop that into. Yeah, we'll talk about the responsibilities of that teachers have, which often leads to burnout.
Yes, absolutely. And so I love everything in my role about, yes, working in schools to help students, but I very much enjoy my role to help teachers. And so when I'm working in schools, I love to build a consistent language across the whole school community by working first and foremost with staff and teachers, and helping to equip teachers with the tools of the Mind Strength method, to I talk to the big four to manage and prevent anxiety, stress, low mood, and burnout. And the Mind Strength method really caters to these four elements, as well as standing up to imposter syndrome, building confidence, building assertiveness. And I absolutely love starting with teachers and teacher well-being, in that space, because we don't want to this is such an important, you as teachers are so incredibly important to look after yourselves for yourselves, but also that old expression, you can't pour from an empty glass. But we want to move beyond that. So it's not just because you're looking after students, it's because you are worthy of looking after yourselves. And then by equipping teachers with the tools, they can then become champions of those tools and build that consistent language when I work with students and when I speak with parents. So we're all on the same page around strategies that can really help everybody.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've sort of you've stolen my thunder there with my next question, but I'm going to lead into it anyway because it's so important. Now, um, in complete honesty with myself, and I think there's many teachers out there, and thankfully I had a tremendous support network. But in the over the years, I've suffered two major burnouts. The first one, and a lot of it was contributing factors. It wasn't so much the job, but it was other things that happened to me. But I'm still trying to do my job. I'm still trying to give my best to my job. So, I had the first burnout. And went into quite a deep depression and suffered from various symptoms and things from that. The second major burnout was I had quite a traumatic motorcycle accident. I was then diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety, and thankfully, again, I had a tremendous support network of family and friends who allowed me to travel a certain way down a certain road, but then quickly pulled me back in. But again, I had medical professionals that helped me. I saw a psychologist, I saw a psychiatrist, I was on antidepressant medication, and all those things. And I was told by my psychologist, she goes, "You have to look after yourself because if you fall down again, there's a greater than 90% chance that you won't get back up again." Which was quite a for someone who's already in quite a depressive state. To hear that, you're just like, wow, that's that's a harsh reality. I pushed myself to go back to work too quickly. I pushed myself because I'm the machismo Aussie male who goes, "She'll be right, mate. I can do whatever. It doesn't really matter."
Yes.
So I physically repaired myself, well, as best I could. There's only so much you can do after you come off a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Um, but and I was told by a dear friend who was also a lawyer, she works in the compensation field. She goes, "If you don't start taking care of yourself now, in 6 months, I can guarantee you are going to fall in a heap."
Yes.
And that was my second burnout. And I said, "No, I'll be right."
Mm.
And I've seen so many teachers that happens to, and then they just walk away from a profession that they love.
Mm.
So for me, I managed, again, I had a great support network. I sought medical treatment. Did I self-medicate for a while? Yes, I did. That's life. I think so many of us did that. But thankfully, I was able to be cared for and looked after and pushed into treatment. My wife, whom I love, who we've been married for nearly 30 years now, she'd send me off to the doctor, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." She goes, "You going to tell the truth?" "Yeah, yeah, no worries, I'll be right." She comes with me one day, and the GP goes, "How you doing, Phil?" "Yeah, no worries, I'm good." He looks to her, and, "How's Phil doing?" "He's horrible. He's
Yeah.
horrible." Um, and then that was sort of having that support network around me. I've been tremendously blessed. But for those who don't have what I've been blessed to have, for those teachers out there, what are maybe some signals and some indicators that they're coming to a point of burnout, and maybe how can they put the brakes on and care for themselves?
Yeah, and thank you, Phil, for sharing your story. And it's a story of challenge, but it's a story also of hopefulness that leaning into the care that you deserve will make a difference in your life. And burnout is a one where if you are already in burnout, it's really hard to just soldier through. It's one of these experiences when I work with people who are in burnout, there's a sense of, I'm not myself. I don't know what's going on. I can't think clearly. I'm exhausted. My mind is whirring on overdrive. And my mood is, I'm really agitated. So there's so many different uh, behavioral and emotional and physiological or physical red flags to suggest that somebody is in burnout. But the bottom line, the thing to look out for is, do you feel different from how you normally feel? And recognize when you're in burnout, as I said, you can't soldier through. Your serotonin has just burnt out. And so it's critically important that you look after yourself and move into strategies that will turn this problem around. Because with the right scientifically supported strategies, problems can be turned around really readily. So that's when we're already in those states, those mental health challenges. But what we want to do is recognize that it is your right to look after yourselves, that we don't want to wait for a burning platform. We don't want to wait for a motorcycle accident and be in PTSD and, be experiencing all sorts of challenging behaviors because why? Like, it's your right to engage in the strategies that will enable you to flourish. And, the beauty is the tools to help manage the problems are very similar to the tools that I use when I'm working in a high performance coaching context or when I'm working in a wellness context. So these are strategies that can help whether you are experiencing things in a clinical context or whether you just want to flourish in your life. So it's two key messages. One is look after yourselves because you're worth it. And two is, if you are struggling, do not suffer in silence, because with the right practical strategies, problems can dissolve and you can get your life back on track.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you are worth it. So every teacher, person, whoever is listening to this, let me say this now, and as to just echo Jodie's words, you are worth it. You are valuable. You can flourish in your life. So again, make sure you look after yourself. It's so critical.
So in your experience, Phil, as a teacher, as an educator, I'm really curious, and I'm putting myself on the interviewer side.
Hey, that's okay.
Because you're the expert, right? You're the expert. What is the block that goes on there that teachers are so and this is a generalization again, but that teachers aren't necessarily good at kind of putting like that assertive space that says, I am worthy of help. I am worthy of coaching, and I am worthy of spending time looking after myself. And self-care does not mean that I am selfish. Self-care is my right. And I'm not just doing it to look after others. I'm doing it because I am worth it. What sets up the block there, do you think? And is there
Oh,
a block there?
Oh, look, I think there is. I think there's a number of blocks, and I think there's a number of hurdles that teachers face. I know, just a very simple one. And I've not always been a teacher. So prior to teaching, I was working as a tool maker. So I was a metal machinist. I was working in industry. I was working in research and development. I was working in some high pressure industries. That required you to, I was working 80-hour weeks at times because we had to get the job done. But if you were sick, you stayed in bed. You took the day off and for the best part, you got well. With teaching, when you're sick, you call in sick for the day or the night before, you still have to prepare all your work for all your classes. You're expected to provide work for your class. Now you feel absolutely terrible, but you're trying to think, okay, where are they up to? What can I do? What can I set that's going to be okay, that, that's going to be beneficial to the students, but not too detrimental to the person who's taking it? That I can't give new learning because the teacher, there's every chance they might not actually do the work. And instead of taking care of ourselves, we have to prep ourselves. So often we will go, you know what, I'm just going to go to work. And it's an industry where also we know that if we're not at work, whilst most industries keep going, or the work will wait for you to come back and do stuff, education doesn't wait. Students don't wait. The exam doesn't wait. It just keeps going. So it's like we go, well, if we're not here, the students suffer. So again, it's that empathy of, well, we will sacrifice ourselves in order to make sure that the students' lives are continuing on as best they can. And I
Yes.
think that's probably the biggest issue in education, that it's easier to go to work sick than it is to take a day off.
Yes.
And again, when you're unwell, your cup is getting empty.
Yes.
And you can't refill it, and the weekend comes and you go, oh, I've missed all this work. So, many teachers try and catch up. I've learned over the years that I might stay back at work till, let's say it's a busy period. We have busy periods at work. I'll stay back at work to maybe 6 p.m. and I'll close my laptop and I'll go home. I'll close my laptop on Friday afternoon and I won't open it again until Monday morning, because I know if I do, I'm going to do some work.
Yes.
I don't have work emails on my phone because I know that dopamine hit when I hear that little ding.
Yeah.
I'm gonna respond to it, and I've got enough distractions.
Totally.
And I want to be able to actually give to my family and be there for my family. We have
Yeah.
responsibilities, but I think the ownership of, I need to get the work done so the students don't suffer. I think that probably is what forces us to continue to work, but then it's, over the last 20 years, the administrative burdens placed on teachers has increased beyond limit almost, and that's why I think you see so many teachers burning out.
Yeah, totally. It's just the requirements of the role. And so I think what we have to do again is we don't, as I said earlier, don't butt heads with the context. I mean, empowered action, yes. If there's anything that you can do to make a difference, to make it more feasible, of course, advocacy is important. But ultimately, what we want to do is see how we can make workable solutions to ensure that teachers do have the strategies that they need to look after themselves in the context of everything else. And there's ways to do that. So some of the key elements when I'm working with schools around managing and preventing burnout and teacher burnout is recognizing some of the mindset contributors. So teachers so often have this double-edged sword of anxiety. And what that means is ultimately it's the care factor. It's that protective instinct. It's that wanting to make sure everything goes well and wanting to make sure every student is looked after, and that thinking mind around is this one okay, and is that one okay, and is that one okay. So it's that combination of the heart and the head, the thinking mind and that warm compassionate heart, that are some of the superpowers that so often underpin anxiety. And so ultimately, and I know, Phil, that you're familiar with some of the messages that I deliver around wanting to change the narrative around anxiety and helping people to recognize the profound strengths that underpin people who experience anxiety. And often this is the teacher. because it's that care factor that has drawn the individual into teaching in the first place. So there's these wonderful strengths, but then there are also the challenges, and the challenges being the worry thoughts kicking in. Will I be able to achieve my goals? Will I be able to do what I need to do in the time that I have available? What if this and what if that? And thinking about outcome, and am I going to be good enough? And are they going to judge me negatively? Especially when you're dealing with multiple stakeholders, staff, students, parents, right? The system,
Yeah.
the tick boxes, right? So there's a lot of fear of negative judgment that can kick in, and that can lead to anxiety. And what that can lead to is burnout, because we're in the sympathetic nervous system, we're in adrenaline and cortisol, we're burning our serotonin reserves. And so mindset tools, and when I talk about mindset, it's about how to move out of fight or flight drivers. It's fight, it's flight, and it's a need for certainty, moving out of perfectionism, moving out of worry, moving out of second guessing. These sorts of elements, how to move out of that and how to move into the parasympathetic nervous system, or problem solving and action around what's in your control. These sorts of tools are elements that are going to prevent burnout as well as manage burnout. So mindset tools are profoundly important. And so what we want to do is dig deep around what's in your control. And there's other simple strategies, such as recognizing consistent engagement with evidence-based, scientifically supported strategies that we know stimulate serotonin and dopamine, such as exercise, such as connecting with people we care about. These sorts of things, we might not have quantity, but can we have quality? We might not have quantity, but can we have consistency? So it's the quality and it's the consistency that matters a lot more than quantity. So let's say we value time with our family and we value connecting with our children or a loved one or friends. Can we make sure that we're engaging in those actions mindfully, even if we don't have much time in a day to do that? So that's one example. Can we walk around the block rather than feel like we need to do the 5 or 10K run in order to be good enough? So we know the science that a walk around the block is going to bring your stress levels down, re-engage the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's working within the context of what is doable to replenish your serotonin reserves. Really important. And moving into action, empowered action around what's in your control, rather than trying to struggle and grapple with the things that are outside of one's control. So these are some elements that we bring together to really help teachers and staff generally, as well as students, of how to manage and prevent burnout. But I could talk for about 5 hours about that.
Oh, look, I'm sure you could. And it sounds like we need a Dr. Jodie Lowinger in every single school.
That's my joy, to be in every single school. That is really my joy. But ultimately, how to learn how to stand up to worry and not let worry boss us around, and not let perfectionism boss us around, all of these sorts of things. So there's a lot that is in a teacher's control to be able to look after themselves and do what they need to do in their day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah, that's some amazing strategies to put in place. And I know perfectionism and the trying to manage what's in your control, because I know, I mean, there's so many young teachers now who they just want to do the best job in the world. Now, I've learned over the years, and I had, again, great support networks in schools that I was at, to go, you don't need to be perfect. Let's just learn. You'll learn how to get better. You won't be perfect on day one. You will be rubbish, to be honest. But as long as you're doing your best and you're connecting with your students and you're learning how to teach well, then you're going to get better. And I find that so many of these young teachers coming out, they want to be perfect from day one. They want the minute by minute lesson plan. They want the beautiful classroom, and they want at all these things that they aspire to, and which they should aspire to. I mean, it's great to have goals, as you know, but I think you go to those SMART goals, just like realistic, achievable, time. It's like, what can you do? And if you're not perfect, go, okay, that's all right. I'm not perfect. I wasn't perfect today. Let's try and be better tomorrow. And I try and I hate the word. Well, it's not that I hate the word perfect. It's not a word that should be brought into education. I think it should be, let's try and be better.
Yes.
Let's learn from our failure.
Yeah, 100%. I do a lot of work, whether it's in a corporate environment or in a school environment, around growth mindset and psychological safety. And this is it, and it's really interesting because as teachers, I know that you are passionate about facilitating a growth mindset within
Yeah.
students. And it's how can we lead by example, right? And it's hard to be um, champions of that whole philosophy, um, and then wanting to ensure that our students are champions of that as well, because it can be so damaging. And the problem with perfectionism, or a belief that I have to be perfect in order to be good enough, is when we flip that around to what that means our fear is, the byproduct of that is, well, not the byproduct, the essence of that is a fear of imperfection. And so when we have a fear of imperfection, and society is just slamming us with the airbrushed versions of self, right, and
Yes.
perpetuating this myth that we have to be perfect in order to be good enough, so we have to stand up to that. The challenge of a fear of imperfection is our brain is wired to focus on all the things that we feel threatened by. That's our primitive survival instinct. And
Wow.
so if we have this worry story around, if I'm not perfect, I'm not good enough. So we fear imperfection, and we've got, it's called hypervigilance. We're hypervigilant, we're focusing in then on all of our perceived imperfections. Or we might actually be scanning other people and perceiving their judgment, that they don't think that we're good enough, because that's our fear, that's our threat. And so the byproduct of that is, the thing that you and I are all too familiar with, imposter syndrome,
Yep.
that we never feel good enough. And so what we do is I call it self-flagellate. We're whipping ourselves and whipping ourselves of
Yep.
never good enough. So when I'm working with teachers, because this is so common amongst educators, and because of that passion to be perfect, right? To be the best that you can be, but it takes it to that perfectionistic element, because when we have perfection, we have certainty, and when we have certainty, we're safe. We know that nothing bad is going to happen. So anyway, again, there's lots that we can talk about there, and the beauty of helping ourselves out of all of this challenging stuff is because it's actually really logical. When we think about us as animals and our primitive wiring for survival and our neuroscience, human behavior works in very predictable, primitive ways. Perfectionism, all of this is based on our need for certainty, which is based on our primitive survival instinct. And the beauty is when we can understand the logic of why we're doing it and understand the logic of why it's unhelpful, it can be much easier to move out of it and move into the helpful. And one little mindset hack is notice when you're focusing on outcome and bring the focus back to effort and be proud of yourself for effort. And it's effort around what's in your control. And just breathe and say, I am doing the best that I can do in the time that I have available. Now, this is easy to say, not easy to do. The other challenge, which does tip people into burnout, is context. And context is such where, and this is a big challenge for teachers, is where the external expectations, so we're talking about context, is such that the expectations exceed capacity.
Yeah.
And that's where we feel trapped, and that can be a really tough environment to be in. So that's when we need advocacy to say, the context exceeds my capacity, and I simply cannot. I cannot do what I'm being expected to do.
And I think that is an amazing statement, and I think that's what the vast majority of teachers feel.
Yes.
That they just don't have the capacity to meet the expectations that are constantly placed upon them.
Yes.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, Jodie. So
That's where we need to do our very best to maximize efficiencies and do the best that you can do with the tools that we can work through together. So we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about like ultimately that we hold ourselves to a high duty of care for our students, or in my case for my clients. And sustainability it's about sustainable high performance, which says I am continuing to do the best that I can do in the context that I'm working in. So we try to maximize efficiencies as best as possible. And mindset is one of those elements that is going to make a powerful difference to enable more sustainable high performance.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's that mindset, that ability to know the truth rather than the feeling. And I mean, you've probably heard the term, and I think Brene Brown termed it, and I use it. And when I first heard it, I was like, wow, and I use it all the time when I'm starting to feel that overwhelmed about certain things, or I'm starting to put the stories in my head. And it was that, speak truth to bullshit. And it's just like, no, hold on, what do I actually know? I don't know anything about what's the administration is saying, or what the students are saying, or what the parents are saying. I know what I can do. I know what my job is. I'm going to do that, and that's going to be the truth to whatever little voices are of insecurity or overwhelmed or whatever it might be in my head. That I'm going to know I'm a teacher who does their job well and does it to the best of their ability, and I think
Yeah.
and that's a tough, like, again, it's one of those things that's much easier said than done.
It is totally. The voice will be there saying not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, and so it's about there's lots of strategies, because oftentimes we can be our own worst bully, right?
Yep.
And it's that voice that we learn ways to get some distance from that voice that says not good enough, that bully story, the critical voice that bosses us around. So it's how to turn the volume down. And part of the turning the volume down is accepting it rather than fighting it. But accepting it isn't buying into it. Accepting it is, hello, I know you're there, bully voice. um, you're this parrot on my shoulder or wolf in my ear or whatever we're going to call it.
Yep.
And and I'm going to learn what you sound like, and I'm going to bring it back to my values and bring it back to assertive action and being proud of myself and learning the tools on how to move forward aligned to the wonderful space that teachers are in, and the phenomenal role that teachers play in society. So, moral to the story is, don't leave your jobs because we need you.
Oh, thank you for that, and I'm sure there's many teachers, and look, as I'm hoping that there's a lot of teachers who actually hear that, not only listen to it, but actually hear it, and take it on. And I I mean, we could talk for hours, and I think I'm definitely going to have to organise another chat with you again,
Love
for
to.
not only for me, but also for our listeners, because what you have to offer, Jodie, and your heart for educators and education, is rarely seen.
You.
You could be, you have, not only the credentials, but you have the passion to be able to go and do, work in your purely in high performance sectors. And you could be quite comfortable, and you could be, yep, I'll do that, and you can do there, and I'll go to this football club, and I'll go to that, CEO, and I'll do all those sort of things. But you're willing to invest into education. So for me, I personally thank you, and I think on behalf of fellow educators, thank you as well.
Yeah, and back at you. Thank you. My three children are flourishing because of teachers like you and the schools that they've gone through. I'm very, very fortunate. They had some really magnificent teachers who just nurtured them and nurtured their confidence. And sense of self and sense of curiosity and passion for learning. So, yeah, I'm really, really grateful. So, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I'm so glad that I've been able to be a part of your eldest life, and be able to speak into him on just, and it's great seeing his journey as well. So that's fantastic. And when other students pop up on the radar, it's great to see where they're at, in their successes, whatever that may be. I never judge. I never judge success on stature or job title or anything like that. If you're happy, and you are, as you like to say, thriving, um, if you are doing that, then your life is all power to you, and congratulations. That's what I like to think. Rather than, you don't have to be the CEO of Fortune 500. You don't have to, you don't have to be looked down upon if you're doing janitorial work, because we need both, and both find joy in both positions. So
100%. Absolutely.
now, usually I have a whole range of rapid fire questions just to finish off, but I think with the way our conversation has gone, I think, today, I think it'd be best just to go, like, where, if people want to get in contact with you, and I'll put all these in the show notes, what is the best way that they can reach out to you, or organizations, educational facilities can reach out to you to maybe learn more about you, to maybe implement some of your strategies into their schools?
Yeah, I'm working with schools all the time. So do feel free to drop me a line, drop me an email if you want me to come and speak at your school, to hello at Dr. Jodie, which is drjodie.com.au. Or my website is drjodie.com.au. And we also have uh, a large team of psychologists and clinical psychologists at the Anxiety Clinic, helping people across Australia. So, working digitally and in person, which is theanxietyclinic.com.au. So yeah, hope to connect with people. And, even if you'd just like to ask me a question and continue the conversation, it's a joy to connect. And I'm on social media as well, LinkedIn and wherever.
All right. Well, I'll put your LinkedIn, and your website, the Anxiety Clinic, and all those details in our show notes for our listeners. But Dr. Jodie Lowinger, a pleasure, and I truly thank you for your time, especially as an evening here in well, you're in Sydney, I'm in Queensland, but I know you have a full life, you have a busy life, and I'm sure you have a loving family waiting to spend some time with you this evening.
Okay, it's all good. I've got my book here as well, Phil. If people want, that's the Spanish version, but this is the
Spanish,
it's Spanish. I know. Hola. Um, it's in Mandarin as well. So this
brilliant.
that's a bit of a flex, right? Um, this is my therapy in a book. So if they want to jump in, it's cram packed with practical tools, really cover to cover with practical tools. It's kind of, in essence, I just wanted to be able to go forth and multiply. And that is why I wrote the book. So that is kind of a self-help toolkit, and that's in audiobook as well. If people want me to be whispering in their ear, they can access that as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Again, I'm assuming that can be accessed via your website as well.
It can, absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I'll put a link to particular resellers, but I'll just direct people straight to your website. I think that will be safer.
That's an absolute joy.
But again, Jodie, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure. And if time permits in the future, I'll definitely have to have another, because I had about 4 more questions. We got through one. So
There we go.
I'll, we'll have to have you on again. But Jodie, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk again real soon.
You too. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.